listening to them played back to me. I sound like such a hick. Which, I've lived in Oklahoma all my life, so I guess that's the way it's supposed to be. A lot of times in class, I will greatly exaggerate the accent because there's nothing I can do with it. So I will just drop off into a really deep accent. Anyway, we're going to call this a bonus tonight. I'm actually going to read two things to you, but only one of them are mine. A couple weeks ago, I was going through a lot of my old stuff. First editions of books from publishers that are no longer with us. Arcs that I put away so I would always have one because I'm a hoarder like that. Anthologies that I had a story in, and once, magazines like I read from a couple weeks ago. One of the other things I found was this. This is called Live Poets in and Around Enid. That would be Enid, Oklahoma, where I grew up. For the last years I was there, the last 7 years, I worked at a machine shop. I worked on night shift. Well, Enid has a very established writers group, but I could not join that writers group because it met during a weeknight. So the only writers group available to me was the Don Blanding Poetry Society, which met one Sunday a month at the Highway Patrol Station of all places. But what I didn't know until I joined was that my high school creative writing teacher, Wilda Walker, was in the group. So that was definitely a bonus for me. Miss Walker was a huge influence. As a writer, as a student, and now that I've become a teacher, I really appreciate how she did what she did. She was Oklahoma's Teacher of the Year in 1976. She has sadly passed on, but I feel like she should not be forgotten. So I'm going to read one of her poems first, and then I'll get into my story. Her poem's really short. Hopefully I can do it justice in my Okie accent. It's called The Promise. The dark twisted branches of a dormant elm form a black lace canopy which stands sentinel duty over the weathered shocks of grain. A lone windmill stands silhouetted against the leaden sky as clear water splashes idly over the rim of the overflowing tank at its feet. Although long shadows fall and a cold gray color scheme predominates the land, a wisp of green shows in the drill row and breathes a promise of spring. By Wilda Nicholson Walker. You can see in her poem that there's always a bit of hope, and that's how Mrs. Walker was. She was very encouraging, a great teacher, a great human being. And that is sweet iced tea, if anybody's wondering. The story I'm going to read to you, this was a suggestion by my friend Rick Gibson up in Canada. It's called Nocturnal Caress. If you've been to conventions I've attended or been in my class, there's a good chance you've heard this story. I like to pull it out and read it around Halloween. I like to read it at conventions because while it is a horror story, I don't think there are any cuss words in it. It's relatively clean, no sex. Not really anything that's going to get a parent to call the school and complain about what I've done. But also, it uses a lot of metaphor and a lot of personification. That's usually the lesson that I kind of use when I'm making an excuse for reading this book, which it really is all it is. But kids ask all the time to read my stuff, and ordinarily I don't like to do that. I had college professors who published books, and they'd make you buy their books. I've never been in favor of that. But anyway, I'll tell you the history of this story after I read it. It's mildly amusing in a sad way. Nocturnal Caress. Last night I visited the Baker house, Pam and Allison Baker of Oklahoma City. I was already under Allison's bed when mother and daughter came home in the evening. I am ancient, and I have learned to be patient. I can wait a long, long time before caressing my victims. I only had to wait a few hours before Allison was mine. They brought food home with them, hamburgers and fries from a chain restaurant. After eating, Allison came into her bedroom, picked up a ball and a jump rope, and went outside to play. Pam stayed in the living room. I could hear the television playing a rerun of The Simpsons. Allison was back in the house an hour later. Darkness comes early in the winter. Sweet, sweet darkness. Pam went to take a shower. Allison changed the channel on the television and became fascinated by a program about a young woman and her friends who slay vampires. I knew this would happen. It was this premonition that drove me to hide under Allison's bed. 7-year-old little girls are not meant to watch such shows. That's exactly what Allison's mother said when she came back from her shower. She changed the television program and sent Allison to get ready for her bath. Allison was sulking when she came in her room to prepare for her bath. I watched from the safe darkness under her little bed as she took clean pajamas from a dresser drawer. I tingled with pleasure as she removed her shoes and began rummaging in a toy box, searching for something to play with in the bathtub. Slowly, stealthily, I reached a hand from the safety of the bed. Between her rolled down pink sock and the cuff of her purple pants, a strip of smooth white flesh was visible. Gently, oh, so gently, I stroked that little flash of soft skin. She jumped. They always jump at first. I am ancient, and I have learned to be quick. I was back under the bed before the child turned to see what had brushed her ankle. Of course, she didn't see me. She left the room without a toy. She returned to her mother. I heard the conversation. Mommy, something grabbed my leg. What? When? Just now, in my room. I think it's under my bed. Yes, they're always sure where I am. They just can't find me. I'm ancient and have learned to hide myself well. There's nothing under your bed, honey. This is what happens when you watch those scary shows. Now go take your bath. Allison did as she was told. By the time she returned to her bedroom to brush her long blonde hair, she'd forgotten about me. But I was still there. I was still waiting. Her slight weight settling onto the end of the bed was nothing to me. Her little bare feet dangling 3 inches above the carpet were everything to me. Her toes were like little beans, her feet smooth and still stubby with extreme youth. Her ankles were dimpled and sweet, and her calves smooth and round where they vanished into a blue nightgown. Again, I reached for her. Yes, my touch is cold and dry, and I know that it is not a pleasant sensation when I make contact with my human victims. That is of no concern to me. I touched little Allison's right ankle, skimming down the red bottom of her foot to spread her toes. I should not chuckle at the way she jerked and jumped off the bed. The hairbrush she'd been using fell to the floor and bounced twice on the carpet. Allison, poor dear, was almost crying as she explained to Pam that there really was something under her bed. Really, really. I saw them coming toward me. 2 sets of bare feet, 4 naked ankles. They paused at the end of the bed. Pam's lovely toenails were painted a soft blue with sprinkles of glitter in the polish. Her hands came down, her long fingers, with nails painted to match the toes, came down and scooped up the dropped hairbrush. There's nothing there, Allison, Pam's voice said again. Then Pam settled to the floor, folding her long bare legs under her. Her nightgown was much shorter than that of her chaste little daughter, coming only about halfway down her silky thighs. She raised up the edge of the bedspread, and her face looked into mine. She cannot see me, of course. I am ancient, and I've learned to become invisible. I studied Pam as she gazed half-heartedly under Allison's bed. She had soft pink lips and large brown eyes, long blonde hair. I wanted to touch her, but I knew it was best to wait. I had to finish with Allison first. See, honey, there's nothing there. But something touched me. I felt it, Allison argued. There's nothing. Come and look. No, I don't want to. Come on and get in bed. I'll tuck you in. I watched Allison's pudgy little feet move around the bed. She didn't let them dangle as she settled onto the bed, but pulled him up quickly. Oh, it was hard not to reach out and touch Pam's lovely ankles with my cold caress. Her very toes came under the shadow of the bed, but still I refrained. Finally, the mother walked away. She turned off the bedroom light and pulled the door so that it was almost completely closed. I was alone in the dark with little Allison. Few children have the ability to lie still when they sleep. Even when they do, it is no matter to me. I am ancient, and have learned to control my temperature, which in turn affects the temperature of the air around me. I made myself hot, very hot. Soon, Allison was tossing around on her bed above me, trying to get out from under the blankets in her sleep. And then her little foot flopped over the side of the bed and hung before me. Tiny blonde hairs were backlit from the sliver of light coming into the bedroom through the space between the door and the jamb. With trembling fingers, I touched the smallest of her toes, plucked at it like a boy in a berry patch. She twitched but did not pull away. I leaned from the dusty darkness under her bed and softly kissed her ankle. My dry, withered tongue slid between my parched lips and caressed the softness of her instep. She woke up screaming. I laughed softly and withdrew to the darkness under the bed where I could watch her little feet hit the floor and run from the room. There was no way, she explained to her mother, that she was going back in there as long as the monster was under her bed. Pam gave up the fight. Come on, Allison, you can sleep in my bed with me. I am ancient, and I have learned to move quietly. Allison was already in her mother's bed when I entered Pam's bedroom. Nobody saw me move through the open door. Pam sat on the side of the bed, setting the time on an alarm clock. I scuttled between her soft, naked feet to the safety under her bed. She screamed and raised her feet. What was that? What happened, Mommy? I thought I felt something run between my feet, like a cat, only it didn't feel hairy. It's the monster, Allison yelled. I laughed until my ancient eyes produced one single tear each. There's no monster, Pam said. Maybe it was just a draft of cold air. It's the monster. Hush, Allison, hush. There's no monster. I'll look under the bed. No, Mommy, he'll get you if you do that. Let me go, Allison. I'm going to look. She did. Pam knelt on the floor and leaned over to look under her own bed, just as she had looked under her daughter's. I was having fun. I reached out with an invisible arm and quickly, lightly traced a finger along the soft line of her jaw. Oh, she screamed and jumped so high. I laughed and laughed. Allison screamed and I laughed some more. Pam jumped into the bed and pulled the covers up. What happened, Mommy? Did you see the monster? Go to sleep, Pam said. There's nothing under there. I didn't see anything. There's nothing. Oh, no. There's nothing under the bed. Nothing but me. Nothing but fear. The women remained awake until morning, finally slipping into a light sleep after the sun began lighting the bedroom windows. I slipped away, my work finished, my fun over. Pam and Allison will not forget me for a long time. They may never let their lovely feet linger near the shadows under their beds for fear I will reach out and caress them again. No matter. There are others, so many other beds, so many other feet. Tonight I will be in Newport, Oregon. A boy named Daniel McComb is reading a scary story despite his mother's warning. I am ancient, and I love disobedient children. So, funny story. Nocturnal Caress was actually the first story that I ever had accepted for publication. This was like the late 80s, and it was accepted by, well, I won't say his name, but the magazine was Eldritch Tales. But it was never published, and I was never paid. And back in those days, I wrote my stories on an actual typewriter. And this was really early. I did not even make photocopies. Back then copiers were extremely expensive, and regular people just didn't have them. Computers didn't have computers. So it was typewritten, and being the genius that I was at the time, I sent him my only copy. And it was never published. And I hadn't saved any previous drafts or anything. That was all I had. So it was gone. It was just gone. First story ever accepted, completely gone. So many years later, when I was putting together the first edition of Darkscapes, I decided to recreate that story. But I'd grown up. At the time, when I first started writing horror fiction, everything had to have a bad ending. Nobody lives, nobody gets out alive, just like life. But when I rewrote it, I had kids of my own. So it deviated. There where Allison's foot dangles over the bed and the monster reaches out and kisses it. In the original, he grabbed her by the ankle and pulled her under the bed. And when he was finished with her, the only thing left was one foot that rolled out from under the bed. And then he moved on. So obviously, it's a much different story now. I think it's a better story. I kind of like the scene where the monster runs between Pam's feet and she screams and then continues to insist that there's nothing there because she can't see it. That's the story of Nocturnal Caress. People seem to like it. I don't know. I like it. It's currently in my book, God of Discord. There are several stories in here, including A Drink from the Springs that I read a couple of weeks ago. And more than likely, the story I read next week will be in here too, unless I go back to the werewolves. I kind of wanted to read Okie Werewolf Seeks Love. We'll see. But now that's it for tonight. I appreciate you watching. I hope you have a good night, a good Friday, and a good weekend. And I hope to see you back next week. Bye.